So as the time or the sand in the hourglass is running out, meaning we're running out of time, because the Zaman is coming very close, as Pesach is here, and we'll be taking a break until Mitzvah Shem, Rosh Chodesh Iyar. So this is, of course, the great work of Yaakov Kronenberg. It's really it's a groundbreaking work, because no one talks about this, and it's so deeply embedded. Astrology, Jewish astrology, a cosmic science. Now let's come over here and see what Rabbi Yaakov has to say. Here we are. So he says, my main astrology teacher was a great astrologer, very deep thinker, and an extraordinary person who I met when I was 22 years old. He originally came from Hungary. His original name was Zoltan Schnitzer. When he came to New York, he became known as Zoltan Mason, and he was a preeminent astrologer and book collector in America at that time. He was great in many areas, and I can give a whole lesson about him. But Zoltan Mason once told me that the real source of astrology is the Bible, where the subject is mostly concealed. I have found that sometimes in the Bible, astrology can actually be found in very simple places. Over the years, as I have lived and studied in Jerusalem, I came to really see that many things in astrology, they're found in the Torah. Now, he says, this is a general part. He says, if you believe in astrology, you have to believe in the Torah. This is what I think. And if you don't believe in the Bible, then many things in astrology will not be available to you, or won't make any sense to you. You might think that you have the truth, but you are off course from the start. Archetypes are at their heart understanding the zodiac. Now, we're trying to understand what an archetype is. An archetype is a master model, or the template. And this universal zodiac is basically the horoscope of the first human creature, which is called Adam and Eve. Right? Remember, they're attached to begin with. They're aspects of each other. When astrologers talk about astrology, they talk about the zodiac. So the zodiac is a system of a circle of 12 different signs. So the zodiac starts with Aries, which is the ram, which is the first house, which we're coming, and this is our time now. We are in this period, and this is the period of the Passover and the Paschal Lamb, and so on and so forth, which is basically about the personality of the person. That's what the first house is about. And then the chart moves to, the zodiac moves to Taurus, which is about money. And then the third house, which is Gemini, and how people communicate. And Gemini is the constellation of communication. So there are 12 different places along the zodiac. Each is different. In Jewish mystical astrology, everything is learned from the archetypal chart of Adam. That is Adam Arishon, the first man, which he says is the first creation, and which is male and female. I think that today all astrologers accept the idea that there is this archetypal chart. And I'll tell you why. Let us read a little in the Bible where it discusses the world's creation and how the first man was created. Regarding the creation of the first man, it is said, God breathed a soul in man, and then he took one of his ribs, which is a part of the man himself. That's a metaphor. And made the first woman, and were the first couple, and were called Adam and Eve. That's Adam and Chava in Hebrew. And rabbis ask some questions, one of which is, why did God start the world with one couple? Why didn't he start with more? And they explain that the reason God started the world with one couple is so that no one could say, well, my ancestors were better than yours, or I am from a better source than you. A scenario in which there would be no united universality. So everything would be wandering around. And where there would not be one science to understand human beings and other creatures and objects. This idea is called the archetypal chart, the archetype chart. Without that, there could not be one science, one psychology. There wouldn't be any oneness at all. Now, let me see if I can bring it down. Easier to read, and I just have to be able to adjust the book. So he says, So he says, in other words, one original man-woman combination produces everything that comes after that, and then that archetype, that is the basic pattern that appears over and over and over again. So when astrologers talk about the archetypal chart of the zodiac, they actually assume that the human race started with one couple. And the rabbis explained that this as being God's way of making sure that one could not say to the other, my father is greater than yours. So it's a concept of the universality, once again, the oneness of all these things. So he says, for example, by this archetypal chart, it's accepted that the Aries rising is the idea of the Aries person, a courageous person, who fears nothing and always goes for and achieve what he wants. A strong personality, in other words, the ideal male person. This is masculinity at its best. Now, let's take a Pisces person, which is the 12th house, when this is the house before the first house, is the ending house. So it's the 12th house. On the other hand, it thinks and hesitates too much before doing anything. So it would be hard for such a person to achieve things, and such a person would have had more difficulty in life. So the ideal chart of Adam Rishon was one of an Aries person, the bull type. That was Adam Rishon, the pioneer, the beginner. The word archetype in Latin means the original man. So indeed, Adam Rishon, that's what we call the first man, was the archetype. Even though everyone is different from everybody else, there is one universal understanding of man in astrology, irrespective of race or creed, due to the archetypal chart. So, in other words, that everything starts according to what the first house is, if the first house is dominant. So, or the second house or the third. So, believing in astrology automatically means and leads to believing in the Bible, or at least in this part of the Torah where the story of the beginnings of the human race is discussed. Astrology started with Adam and Eve, who was the ideal couple with the ideal horoscope, and it did not start with some Babylonian out there somewhere. Now, this is an argument that he said before, because they start to say that when you start getting into astrology, just general astrology, they'll try to see, well, where is the origin of these ideas? He says it's right here in the Torah. Eve's horoscope is different from Adam's, in that her ascendant is not on Aries, but on the other side, she's the opposite of him, which is Libra. But this is a discussion for another time. He said when the first man, it's called now, we're going to call Adam Rishon, sinned. So we see in other places in the Zohar that he got deeply involved in his own physicality, in his own taivas, his own urges. God decided to use the planetary system to deliver his energies to human beings and the rest of the world. Now, we've heard that before. He was no longer able to be a receptacle by himself for the light of God. It had to be moved through different energies. So we have this, the gears of the universe traveling over our head. The world started in the Middle East, and later the world migrated to Babylonia, Iraq of today. There all people gathered, tried to build the Tower of Babel, gather all humanity around themselves, and become one race. So they made God angry, and with them, they tried to rebel against him, and he scattered them around the world and mixed up their languages. Until that time, they all had one language, which is Hebrew. But after that, other languages emerged, and people started speaking different languages. So therefore they couldn't communicate. There are scientists who believe that all languages started from one original language, which they hold that the original language was Zulu, not Hebrew, but in any case. If you look through the researches of all kinds of scientists, archaeologists and anthropologists, DNA experts, etc., you see that they conclude that humanity originated from one couple. Why? Since they have no other reference point, many call this couple Adam and Eve. So then you start to say that, because what's one couple? One couple means one male, one female. Put the world together. though they still debate the question of where Adam and Eve came from, Africa or other places. This is the idea of monogenesis. What's monogenesis? It's just like people everywhere have accepted the idea of the week being divided into 7 days. And nowhere is there a week with more or less days. So the whole world accepts the idea of 7 days. And so is the number 10. And all the systems of mathematics being divided by and multiplied by 10. Though today computers have a system based on 2, I think the only logical explanation of everyone accepting these systems is due to all these being originated and written in the Bible. So the 7-day week is an archetypal system, and so is the number 10. For example, 2 times God, 10 times God said, "Let there be," and there was. That's it. This is Baruch Fleischman, Jewish Astrology, from Rabbi Yaakov Kronenberg.